Hi everybody! In this video, we will talk about the logic of scientific inferences. Scientific inferences are about making educated guesses on some phenomena. These guesses are called hypotheses. Usually, people think that scientists are trying to confirm their hypotheses by collecting supporting evidence or observations. This is a sort of inductive reasoning. Through examining many specific observations and making a general claim. For instance, after observing a large number of business persons, you find out they are greedy. So you make a general claim that all business persons are greedy. Of course, this is problematic, because if you continue observing more business persons, you may find one who is not greedy. That is the problem of inductive reasoning. No matter how many observations you have made, there are always observations in the past, at present, and in the future you haven't made. In other words, you can never prove your general claim is truth. Does that mean science cannot lead us to truth? Not really. Science can still lead us closer to truth by eliminating false hypotheses, by deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning. What is deductive reasoning? Let's take a common sense statement. If it rains, then the floor gets wet. So whenever it rains, we will predict a wet floor. In notional terms, the reasoning can be represented as follows. If P, then Q. If it rains, then the floor gets wet. Given P, now it rains, therefore Q, the floor gets wet. Now we see a wet floor. Can we say that it rains? In notional terms, it is if P then Q. If it rains, then the floor gets wet. Given Q, now the floor gets wet, therefore P, therefore it rains. No, we cannot. It's because there may be other causes, like someone pouring water on the floor, making it wet. Now, if we cannot see the floor wet, can we say that it doesn't rain? Again, in notional terms, it's something like this. If P, then Q. If it rains, then the floor gets wet. Given not Q, now the floor is not wet, therefore not P. Therefore, it does not rain. Yes, we can. If we cannot find out Q, we can confidently say P is not present. How does this relate to hypothesis testing or in general theory testing? But let's do an exercise before going to that. A theory can be regarded as a set of interrelated hypotheses. Testing a theory means testing its constituent hypotheses. As we know, theories are something abstract, something in our minds, and we cannot test something in our mind. If we want to test a theory, we need to derive some empirical observations from the theory. Let's consider a simple theory with just one hypothesis. Social cohesion reduces suicidal tendency. Social cohesion and suicidal tendency are both something abstract in our mind. But we can derive some empirical or real-world reference for the hypothesis. We can say that religious people are more socially cohesive than non-religious people, because they develop a sense of religious belonging with their religious fellows, and suicidal tendency can be observed as suicide rate. Thus, we can derive an empirical hypothesis from the theory. The suicide rate of religious people is lower than that of non-religious people. We collect data from the real world and see whether this empirical hypothesis is correct. If we fail to observe that the suicide rate of religious people is lower than that of non-religious people, what can we say about our theory? Let's use the deductive reasoning to see what happens. If theory, then observation. If social cohesion reduces suicidal tendency, then we should observe the suicide rate of religious people is lower than that of non-religious people. Given not observation, now, the suicide rate of religious people is not lower than that of non-religious people. Therefore, not theory. Therefore, social cohesion reduces suicidal tendency is wrong. Well, we can reject the theory, but if we observe the anticipated outcome, then what? If theory, then observation. If social cohesion reduces suicidal tendency, then we should observe the suicide rate of religious people is lower than that of non-religious people, given not observation. Now, the suicide rate of religious people is lower than that of non-religious people. Therefore, theory. Therefore, social cohesion reduces suicidal tendency is true. This reasoning is not right. We cannot say the theory is true. However, as the theory passes the test, we have more confidence about the theory. Thus, we can say that the theory is more credible or believable. In short, we can prove a theory is wrong, but can't prove it is right. This idea is known as falsification. The more tests a theory passes, the more credible a theory will be. That is why theories are often tested repeatedly. How about the rejected theories? Are they useless? Not really. If a theory passed many tests but failed at one, we can examine under what conditions the theory passed or failed the tests. Then we can specify some auxiliary conditions under which the theory works. In other words, the theory is not universally true, but it still has limited usefulness. Now, before proceeding to talk about scientific progress and clarifying a misunderstanding about falsification, let's do an exercise. As we know, each theory has its rival counterparts to explain certain phenomena. For example, social cohesion is not the only reason to explain religious people having lower suicidal tendency. Maybe religion can give spiritual support that reduces suicidal tendency. Or maybe religion has a strict rule of forbidding suicide. The alternative causes of reducing suicidal tendency are many, and we don't know how many. Let's say the theory, social cohesion reduces suicidal tendency, has two major competing theories. Spirituality reduces suicidal tendency, and rule forbiddance reduces suicidal tendency. Although testing the theories using religious and non-religious people may not help us to differentiate them, we can devise another test in which our concerned theory implies the observation, but its competing theories implies the otherwise. Devising a proper test is one of the key elements of research design. And it's not easy, but let's try. Hong Kong is an ethnically homogeneous city with 92% Chinese population in 2016. In contrast, Malaysia is more ethnically diverse, with 69.8% Malay, 22.4% Chinese, and 6.8% Indian in 2021. Thus, we can say that social cohesion in Hong Kong is higher than that of Malaysia. According to the theory social cohesion reduces suicidal tendency, we can derive an empirical observation. Hong Kong has a lower suicide rate than that of Malaysia. Regarding spirituality, Malaysia is a Muslim country, and many Malaysians have a religious commitment. In contrast, Hong Kong has always been known as a material city. Spirituality is not a thing for Hong Kong people. According to the theory, spirituality reduces suicidal tendency. We can derive an empirical observation. Hong Kong has a higher suicide rate than that of Malaysia. Regarding rule forbiddance, suicide is criminalized in Malaysia, but not in Hong Kong. According to the theory, rule forbiddance reduces suicidal tendency. We can derive an empirical observation. Hong Kong has a higher suicide rate than that of Malaysia. Since Hong Kong can only have higher or lower suicide rates than that of Malaysia, but not both, we can either reject social cohesion or spirituality and rule forbiddance. If we find out that the suicide rate of Hong Kong is lower than that of Malaysia, we cannot say social cohesion theory is true, but we can falsify the spirituality and rule forbiddance theories. By eliminating two competing theories or alternative explanations, this makes social cohesion theory more credible. Let's find out the facts. Unfortunately, Hong Kong has a higher suicide rate than that of Malaysia. We should reject our social cohesion theory. However, both spirituality and rule of forbiddance theories become more credible. And we need to devise another test to examine their falsity. We can find two places with similar spirituality but different rule forbiddance. For example, both Malaysia and Qatar are Muslim countries. Thus, they have similar spirituality levels, but But suicide is legal in Qatar and illegal in Malaysia. Or we can look at two places with different spirituality but similar rule forbiddance, like China and Japan. Suicide is legal in both countries, but the Japanese are more spiritual than the Chinese. Once we have devised the test, we can examine the suicide rates to see which theory is falsified. Some people think that scientific progress is about finding out the true theories, not falsifying theories. Indeed, falsification is the foundation of scientific progress. As the logic of deduction shows us that it is impossible to prove a theory is correct because there are so many known and unknown alternative theories explaining the same phenomenon. The only way to approach to the true theory is to eliminate as many alternative theories as possible. By doing numerous very different tests to falsify many alternative theories, the remaining theories will become more and more credible. If we can eliminate all but one theory, then that theory would be the ultimate truth.